in the arts. With the Faith in Arts Research Project, we are presenting conversations with artists and scholars whose work may offer us fresh ways of thinking about the connections among religion, spirituality, and the arts in our time. These conversations will lead into the Faith and Arts Institute, which will be held in the fall of 2021. You can learn more about the project on the Black Mountain College Museum and Arts Center and UNC Asheville websites. Again, welcome. Now, on to the conversation with Marie Cochran. Marie Cochran is an American installation artist, educator, curator, and art writer. Her work centers on issues of race and gender from an African American perspective and explores the dynamics of Affrilachia. She is the founding curator of the Affrilachian Artist Project, an organization that promotes the concept of Affrilachia and works with artists of color in Appalachia. This academic year, she's the Lehman Brady Professor at the Center for Documentary Studies at Duke University. She will be in conversation with Jeff Arnall, Executive Director of Black Mountain College Museum and Arts Center.
Hi, Marie.
Hi, Jeff.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It's really great to see you.
Well, I'm glad to be a part of this conversation. I've really been looking forward to this.
Thanks. I know in one of our previous conversations, you mentioned the importance of your early experience with the church and how it connects to your life as an artist, a curator, a writer, an educator. I wanted to ask if you could share some of those early memories that you have of experiences with spirituality and faith.
Well, it's interesting in the time since we had that first introductory conversation to get this conversation going, I thought about some other things that are important outside of the traditional structure of the institution of the church. And for me, that's the African American church that's rooted in Christianity. And so that was very much a part of the Black community for me, especially in Appalachia, and the work that I'm doing, looking at Black communities in Appalachia, because our numbers, demographically are small. So, that was an institution that we owned, that, Black people built literally with their hands, where at the end of a long work day, you could, take off your coveralls or your apron or whatever it was that you did in your workplace, and then become, the superintendent of the Sunday school or a deacon or a deaconess. But then I started thinking about personally those individuals that were faith leaders. They weren't necessarily given a high position in the church structure, but primarily these were women who, I don't even know, they were like, they had a spiritual presence. They were healers. And I think very specifically about my grandmother on my mother's side, Bernice Brewer, who except for the fact that she was a woman in the traditional church, would have become a pastor because she had this way of carrying herself and literally preaching to people who came to her house and, took counsel from her. And not to diminish the stories too much, but then there was also, on my father's side of my family, Big Mama, Lenny Mae Cochran, who was this like central figure in her community. And she would lay hands on people and pray for them and heal them. And then there was her sister, Georgia Oglesby, who would just have these visions that would come over her, and she would almost prophesy about, your life, your future, the prospects in whatever endeavor that you might be troubled with in your life. So those things immediately were available to me. And then it wasn't just on Sundays. So, we've been talking a lot about these elders in the community who were leaving us, of a particular generation where their spiritual life was ever present to them. So I just wanted to add that and invoke their names of Bernice Brewer, Lenny Mae Cochran, George Oglesby.
Thank you so much. That is so amazing to hear, and what wonderful, experience that must have been to have those mentors and have all of those folks around you. As you get into your art making, and as it connects to that, because a lot of those things that you mentioned of like these healing powers are almost prophecies. Art has the ability to do that, and in so many ways that the artist almost doubles on that role of like faith leaders or spiritual leaders and artists, and you could. Those are sometimes very intertwined and very connected. And I have the feeling do you feel that way in your work?
You know what? It's interesting that it's really become more profound for me in the last year, literally. The piece that, I was thinking I was going to focus on in our conversation was something that I did a couple of years back. I think it was in 2012, about an African-American church called Mount Zion African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church in Jackson County, in Cullowhee. And it was in many ways the trigger that opened up this door for me in my work, because prior to that, my work had focused on social justice, specifically social justice, socioeconomic, political issues. That's what it was about. When I moved back to the region, when I took the job at Western Carolina University and found out about this church from the era of enslavement that had been removed from the campus to build a dormitory in 1930, that's when I first did my overtly spiritually inspired work, because it wasn't about the socioeconomic or social justice issue of this congregation being forced to take the money that was offered to them. And, they had no choice to move, dig up the graves, demolish the church, and rebuild across the street. I started thinking about the spirit world. I started thinking about those graves, those spirits, those family members, those primarily men in the congregation that had to dig up their loved ones and move their remains. And even in talking to some of my friends who are Cherokee and talking about, indigenous land and removal, all of these things kind of got going. And then literally, Jeff, I did a piece that was at Piedmont College that just closed last night. And it was called Notes of an Affrilachian Daughter in the Era of COVID-19. And because of deaths in my family, related and unrelated to COVID, I overtly brought in spirituality into the piece. And it was amazing. Literally, photographs of those family members I just mentioned from my maternal and my paternal and my maternal side, objects that invoked their presence, my, grandmother Cochran's hat, my grandfather Cochran's hat, all of these things that brought me back to this issue. So the timing of our conversation is perfect. And I know part of it is really because, we're being reflective.
Mhm.
We're in a different mindset, and we're embracing these issues. And as an artist, I want to invoke those things. And I know that personally, even in the conversations I've had with people, that literally we are conjuring up the presence of those people. And that's the thing. Last night, this was a very telling thing. Someone asked me, because on the wall where I had the photographs of family members and various items, it was like the ancestor wall. I also had the rendering from the CDC that everybody's familiar with of the COVID-19 image as it's been visibly portrayed. And I had a photograph of a line of masks like this one, a handmade fabric mask that I have on a towel rack, literally from my bathroom. And underneath that, I had this collage that said antidote. And somebody from the audience asked me, and it just really hit me. This is very in the moment. They said, well, that word antidote paired with those images, do you feel that your family members, those people who passed on, are part of the antidote to the virus? And I was like, well, kind of, that was what I was thinking, not so overtly, but symbolically. And then I also started to think that really their presence in my life is an antidote that guards me against everything that I face that's poisonous, that's negative. So that was spot on.
Yeah.
For me.
Wow, that's amazing. What a moment. Last night too. And I want to just go back just for a moment, because we were so on the landing page of the this event is Testify Beyond Place. And it's such a poetic film, and it is very delicate, and there is a statement at the end of the film, and I won't read it, but you could it's on the website as well. Right. And it's without the setup, and I think that, so I just want to kind of understand a little bit more about, because it is such a powerful work, and it's you told us a little bit about the history of the project and the collaborators, but I guess this kind of decision that, like you said, that this becomes provides a context for dialogue. Yeah.
Right.
And then, so what comes of the film, in your conversations with the campus, with your community, with the community around it? I'm sure that it's now, there's probably been multiple conversations and multiple new avenues to explore.
Well, at the time that it was shown, it was part of an installation piece at the Fine Art Museum. It did not get a very large audience. And I'm choosing my words very carefully because I'm trying to think this through. I don't think people were ready to receive it. And I knew that was possible at the time. So I wasn't particularly shocked. I was disappointed, but I wasn't shocked. And I had kind of prepared myself because I knew what my goal was. And I went into it as an African-American woman, as a person of faith, as someone who was very much a part of that community and not just simply teaching on campus. I prepared myself by telling myself that I was doing it for the church family with no other expectations from the powers that be. And so, mission accomplished. The remaining, at that time, only about 7 or so church members that were, I invited them to campus. We had, full out, it's hard to remember this, a full out reception with food.
Wow.
And hugs and close contact. And I remember at one point, because I had these objects, all around the floor that even suggested the traditional itinerant marking, flat stones, things like that, not, headstones. One of the women, and I didn't stop her. She reached down and she picked up a gourd. And, it was like collaged on and drawn on and everything. She picked it up and she said, oh, I know what that is. Sometimes we used to have these and we drink water out of them. And she put it right back.
Wow.
And it was like they walk through the space, because I call it the shoebox gallery. For people who go to campus, they'll notice, rectangular, there's, no windows. There's a high wall. I can't remember the dimensions, but it's very conducive to being able to project the film, which I did, into the space. And there was a wall built in so that when you walked in, you saw the title, you walked around, and there was literally a bench, signifying a church bench in some way. So you could sit there quietly and be able to see this film and to look at these objects and the other things in the installation piece. But all that to say, the current pastor was there, and everyone was able to interact and felt that they had a certain kind of acknowledgement that they had not had before. And some of them had not even been on the college campus before, let alone the Fine Art Museum. So fast forward to now, and I've shown the film at the Black Communities Conference, sponsored by University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, which is one of the institutions that I have a fellowship with, both Duke and UNC. And it was projected in a real movie theater, and people came to tears, not even knowing anything about the story until after we had the question and answer. It was just that invoking of things and the sounds of people, the prayers, all these flickering images, recognition of the images related to communion and all of that. So now, after the second wave of the Black Lives Matter movement, I feel that, even having presented at the Appalachian Studies Association conference recently, that I will revisit the conversation with Western Carolina University and talk about the other types of ways that we can use this film to have a dialogue about this part of their history. I wouldn't have been able to consider that at the time that the piece was originally shown. Like I said, I wasn't surprised, but I was disappointed that there was, no official statement, no recognition in terms of anything. But now I think we can. It's a different era. And I think that for me, I really want to engage in this conversation with students.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, and then we can have a discussion about not just the social justice implications, but the spiritual implications of this, because, we're in the midst of a time when we're talking a lot more openly about death.
Yeah.
And what does it mean to encounter a grave site when we talk about issues of land ownership and development? All of those things.
Yeah. And I think that it's a different time this month, from last year. It is a work in progress, and it's such an important conversation. And I'm so happy to hear that you're going to revisit it. And because it's just a way of the world, and it's part of the equation that we always forget, unfortunately, is
right.
the time part of things. And
Right.
and you're bringing up so many things that deal with history and time and elders, and what is known and forgotten, and how we embrace something or evoke, as you said. I think that was what I really loved so much about the film, was that that it was so powerful in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that. And you know, I'm wondering if you could tell our audiences a little bit about the Affrilachian Artist Project, and what's next for that project.
Oh, wow. So I have to pace myself. Well, I want to get back to that point you made about time, because
Okay.
I've really, let's just start. Because as artists, very often, like other people in the public sphere that deal with cultural production, if you want to use that term, and I'm not going to stay on that term, but there's this thing of what's trending. I mean, even before social media, it's like, well, you did this project that had a particular lifespan. What's the next thing, and what's the next
Mm-hmm.
thing? And I've begun to think about going back and revisiting things,
Mm-hmm.
and that's been such an eye opener for me, because it's like, I've said it before, it's like going deeper and seeing things in a different way. And I want to stay with this before I answer your question. But
this is, I think this is to it. Yes.
It is. It is. It really is. Because one of the things that came up when, I started thinking about this project is that it wasn't just about what happened in 1930.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just about the fact even that many of those people who were superimposed over images of their ancestors, because that's what you saw with the different hands. You saw hands from a establishing shot of, the trustees from 1930. And then you saw people from 2012, 2013, who were related to them as older people, but they passed away. I mean, I think everybody except maybe 2-3 people have passed away since that film was made. But now, even in the larger discussion about funerals and death, we're living in a society where people don't even have graves. We have a society now, because of changing, views about death and final resting places and economics. They can't afford a casket. They can't afford a grave plot, and they're being cremated. And it's not by choice. Yeah. And so in this discussion way back, there was a profound statement that was made by a friend of mine, and I'm going to try to remember, Thomas Belt. He's a Cherokee elder. And he gave me this translation from the Cherokee language that he teaches. And it's that our graves are our deeds.
Mm.
And I was like, wow. And then bring that to what I just said.
Yeah.
So what do we have? What do people have that may have never owned anything, especially, land and homes, real estate for themselves? They can't even claim a place to have their family come and visit them. So how else can we honor them? We know that's a fact. So what are the other rituals that we're going to develop to remember those people? So that's one thing. The other thing is, what am I doing now? The one thing of all of these other things that I'm doing within the context of today that I can tell you about is the Affrilachian Artist Project really came about out of my return to the South and my being in Western North Carolina, my meeting Frank X. Walker and finding out about the term Affrilachia that had preceded me by 20 years. So now, this month, I celebrate the 10th anniversary of going to the first symposium that they had at the University of Kentucky at his invitation and doing this slideshow, this PowerPoint about Black artists from the region. And then it grew into curated exhibitions and other types of projects, including residencies and, even strategies about honoring African American communities with oral history projects, all these other things. But one of the things that happened was I met this amazing Atlanta-based photographer, Chris Aluka-Berry. And we came to that church after I'd done the film. And we decided that we were going to do a documentary photography project. And we specifically, as a result of that and some other discussions we had, decided that we were going to look for the oldest Black people in every community that we went to. And we have hundreds of photographs from Western North Carolina, from that church and around the area, Murphy, North Carolina, Texana community in particular, North Georgia, where I'm from. And the plan is to also do East Tennessee. So we're going to take this little circle within the region as a start. And we're already in talks with the University Press about a photography book that we want to do. So that's the leading thing that I'm working on. I can tell you all the other projects later, but it directly relates to what we're talking about today. And it directly has a through line to that film, Testify Beyond Place.
Yeah. What an incredible project. I can't wait to see how it materializes, and such important work. This has been such a difficult year for all of us. And this is kind of the last question that I have for today. And I've been thinking a lot about, and it sounds like you've also been pondering this as well, our individual purpose and art as purpose, or art as action, and faith as action. And, so many of these things tie into your kind of history of what you even covered today, but what I know of your work. Do you have any parting thoughts on this idea of art in action or faith in action?
Wow. It's funny, I keep going back to this word, antidote.
Yeah.
Again, when it was still really new, and I don't even know how to explain. It was still very new, this whole, and when I say this, let me explain. This Ken Burns quote, and he said, we have three viruses. We have, in no particular order, the reckoning of race, racism. We have a health crisis with COVID-19. We also have the disinformation that's taking place. So it's like 3-part. And at the very beginning, I was saying that my work as an artist is the antidote. As of last night, I'm saying it, my faith is my antidote. It's both. And for different people, they may have different percentages of what that may be, or other things that they think. But I think whatever you bring, whatever resources you have, whatever gives you strength, that's what you use. So that's my answer.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Marie. Thank you for being with us today, and thank you for all of your work and for everything that you do.
Thank you.